Greetings and welcome to Austin, Texas Gardening. Today I'm going to be doing a product review for a really interesting mushroom grow kit. This is the Back to the Roots Pink Oyster Mushroom Grow Kit. So back in 2020 I did their standard oyster mushroom grow kit and time-lapsed it, and it was really fun. This is a really cool company and they make these little simple kits. I think I paid about $30 for this one. I'll have a link in the description where you can get it on Amazon. And I think I saw that link, it might have been $50. I just found it at a hardware store and decided I'd do a review for the product because these are really cool. So pink oyster mushrooms are gourmet mushrooms that you can make all sorts of different dishes with. We'll get into that as I kind of open up the product, but just to talk about what Back to the Roots is for a little bit, they have some information on the box. Basically, a team of college kids realized you can grow mushrooms from coffee grounds and they turned it into a business. And so they sell all sorts of different products. There's like lavender grow kits and tomato grow kits and things like that. And this little box is kind of a housing for it. As you can see here, they have a few examples of the dishes that you can make with these pink oyster mushrooms and a little tutorial on the side of the box. So it takes about 10 days to grow. The first step is to get it soaked in some water. And we're gonna open it up here. And here's what's inside. We got a little squirt bottle to keep it hydrated. Got the little logo on it. Got some, kind of like some sort of learning guide. This is called a discovery booklet. And you can see they've got pearl oyster mushrooms, pink oyster, and golden oyster mushrooms that this is gonna explain a little bit about. When we open it up, it has some instructions here. And so it's saying that we need to open up the bag and scrape it with a fork and then submerge it in some water. So the substrate, which is, I understand to be a bunch of coffee grounds and blended up mushrooms, is what we're gonna use to grow our pink oyster mushrooms, and scratching it with this fork just increases the surface area so we can get some water down in there and they will start to grow. So mushrooms are very obviously fungi. They are decomposers and they do not need light to grow. This is a gardening channel where we usually talk about plants, but mushrooms are definitely not plants. They are still wonderful edible foods. And this does not look edible or wonderful. It looks pretty gross if I'm being honest. This is a substrate, this little bag of pink mushrooms, and you can see there we got some starting to try to pop up. I got this maybe 2 weeks ago, so I'm a little late on growing it. You're gonna wanna grow these as fast as you can. Let me go run and grab a knife and a fork and we'll get this opened up. So step one, as I've done this before, is just taking a knife and we're gonna use that to open up the bag. It's okay if we dig in there a little bit because we're ultimately going to score this. Now, for my viewers here, I actually have a pretty serious fungal phobia. Using these Back to Roots Grow Kit has helped me overcome some of that because this is so disgusting. I've been playing The Last of Us recently and I have a thing for mushrooms that, to me, mushrooms are pure horror, and we're gonna try to see if I can overcome that with some deliciousness here. So we're gonna take our scored pink oyster mushrooms. I'm gonna give you guys a good showing at what I'm doing here. I'm getting fungal spores all over my hands. It's really, truly disgusting. And we're gonna place this face down in this bowl of water I brought into my office. So I wouldn't be worried about these growing fungal spores in your home office. I've done this before inside, didn't have any problems with it. Obviously, you're gonna wanna keep this away from anything else that might cross-contaminate. So we're gonna leave this here overnight. And when I say cross-contaminate, I mean, if this is in the presence of moldy bread or some other substance on your kitchen counter, it could infect the substrate with that other form of mildew, which could be toxic or something else. Pink oyster mushrooms, very edible, very good. We wanna make sure that's all we're getting. So let's let this sit overnight, and in the morning, we'll get it set up in our mushroom grow kit box. Okay, so it's the following morning. Our mushrooms have been soaking overnight, and as you can see here, there's a bit of a dotted line on the front of the mushroom grow kit. We're gonna cut that out, and we're gonna take our mushroom bag and let it kind of drip out. We want it to be damp. We don't want it to be soaking wet. It's okay if there's a little bit of water on the cardboard. It's obviously a big, nasty brick of fungus, so we're not worried about it getting moldy. Oh, That was probably bad. I just dropped out a little something there. Actually, we're gonna just pop this nasty, gross looking mushroom bits right back in there. I think that's gonna help us out. So with this disgusting mess, we put it here. When it's slid in properly, what you're gonna see is this. So it's mostly covered by its plastic, and we can lift up these flaps. And what we're gonna do is lift up these flaps every couple of days, actually every day, and just give them a little spritz with this squirt bottle, or I've got another little squirt bottle over here. So it's gonna take about 10 days. Let's tune back in here in a week and a half and see what grows.
If you're already subscribed, then you've probably seen this time lapse. I was very happy with the way this turned out. This grow kit put out a super prolific flush, and I watered it, as I mentioned, probably every day. And some of the mushrooms kind of were growing inside the box, out of the cracks. That's not really a big deal. I've done these grow kits in the past, and few have turned out this successful. You can see here it left some spores on my bookshelf, but really, I mean, this was the best I could hope for. So this video is about growing them, harvesting them, and cooking them. Let's move on to the harvest part of the video. In order to harvest your pink oyster mushrooms, you're going to need to detach the fruit from the substrate block that you've been growing them in. They're connected by what's called a stem. I'll get more into the anatomy of this here in a little bit, but you're basically going to just grab the mushrooms and not necessarily twist and pull. It's kind of like pulling a fruit off of a tree. You're going to gently remove them from the block. Here's what you should wind up with. Depending on how your mushrooms have grown, you might have a few stragglers, and that's okay. We're going to attempt a second flush at the end of the video. The part of the mushroom that we're going to eat is called the fruit. That white center with the kind of bit of dirt on it is called the stem. It kind of has the consistency of an apple core, and you can see even our stragglers have a little bit of stem as well. We're going to go ahead and cut our mushrooms so as to remove that stem. I'm sure there's multiple different ways to prepare pink oyster mushrooms, but I decided to dice mine finely into little bits. We're ultimately going to cook them by frying them in a skillet, and they're going to have the consistency of bacon bits. So this also helped with just removing the parts of the stem that were kind of inside of my main cluster of mushrooms. As I mentioned, I used the analogy of an apple core. If you cut an apple in half, you're obviously going to have a lot of core. That was kind of the situation that I was dealing with here, and it should be fairly obvious when you have the mushrooms in your hands what part is edible and what part is kind of difficult to cut through. That's the part that you're not going to want to eat. So we're going to go ahead and continue dicing these up into not necessarily fine pieces. When I say bacon bits, I mean like 1 centimeter long and wide, maybe even 1 inch long and wide little cuts, kind of like I have here on my cutting board. I cooked my mushrooms by melting a few tablespoons of butter in a saucepan and just throwing my mushrooms right in. You're gonna wanna stir these gently. I can't remember how long they cook for, but you're gonna basically just brown them out until they look physically like bacon. That's how you'll know that they're ready.
Okay, so we're gonna add about half a tablespoon of brown sugar and some paprika.
You wanna add some salt too?
Yes. Salt is good.
this is kind of what you're aiming for when you're cooking these mushrooms. They should kind of look like pork or maybe seasoned chicken, and they taste like pork, honestly. I'm sure there's a lot of different dishes you could put these in. I chose mine to go in an omelet with some diced up bell peppers. There's probably room to make a quiche or something else pretty fun here too.
It's delicious, and it turned out great. And the cool thing about this mushroom kit is you can just add water and keep growing your mushrooms. So my squirt bottle's getting a little low, but I'm gonna get these nice and soaked, and then we're gonna get them back on the bookshelf.
Unfortunately, my grow kit did not put out a second flush. You can see from this time lapse, it was trying to grow a little bit and then ultimately kind of dried out. Part of this was my fault for skipping a watering day here and there. Another thing that I think might have helped it to put out a second flush, if I had totally submerged the substrate block again, I think that would have given it the water that it needed. All in all, I think that this was a really fun experiment. I had a ton of fun growing my own mushrooms at home. This is a really simple experiment that can be done cheaply and is great to teach anybody about where their food actually comes from, which is something that I think we all benefit from knowing. I hope that you've enjoyed this video. I hope some of my suggestions of how to grow, harvest, and cook these wonderful mushrooms has helped to educate you and help you out, or maybe just entertain you. Thanks again for watching Austin, Texas Gardening, and stay tuned for some of my really cool up-and-coming spring gardening projects.